I saw the Buddy Hield dunk sitting in my car waiting for Xander to finish a play date. Before I went inside, you know, I gave him the 3 extra minutes. I got to the house early, wanted me to pick him up at a certain time, and I just waited. So I'm like, okay, there I am. And I saw it in the palm of my hand sitting in a car. So in this day and age, you need to hold on to your information, and I'm wondering how this happened. Pete Thamel of Sports Illustrated joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Pete?
One of the great days of the year, Rich. I'm doing awesome. I'm fired up.
I bet, you know, with all this information that's in front of you, how did this thing get tweeted out, do you think? What's going on?
I really have no idea, but I do feel like there was some karmic comeuppance to it all. I mean, look, I actually decided not to watch the show yesterday because I was like, I can use 2 hours better than it usually drags on a little at an hour, and I was like 2 hours. I was like, there's no chance. So I actually went to a coffee shop and started writing a story and was following on Twitter. It was not well reviewed on Twitter, the pace at which it was going on. At some point, somebody tweeted that they wanted Adrian Wojnarowski to start breaking all the selections like he usually does for the NBA draft. And so I really have no idea how it gets out. It probably ends up in more hands than you think when you think about. You got a bunch of NCAA people, you have a bunch of CBS people, but it certainly was a fascinating little moment in modern media, wasn't it?
Well, certainly everybody who has it understands that it is proprietary, and it's something that the business model requires a lot of money to be spent to get that exclusively. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when CBS had a selection show when I was on SportsCenter that ESPN would have a graphics operator looking at CBS and then typing in the bracket, and we try to get it up as fast as possible after CBS had announced it, and that was the way that ESPN tried to, you know, combat it or to compete with it. But for somebody to have that from the chain to go out and put it out there, they might be having to get their resume ready today, because I imagine there's a hunt for that Red October right now.
Well, look, it's a multi-billion-dollar investment CBS has, and the selection show is one of the prizes, along with the Final Four games, along with these Thursday, Friday games that are going to happen this week. But and again, I don't know the ratings minutia of it all, but a lot of people watch that darn show. Now, I think those of us that kind of live on Twitter probably overestimate the percentage of America that is on Twitter is less than 10%, and that's even being generous. So I think in our world, that was just a rocket ship. Did it drastically dip ratings? Probably not, but it didn't help. So, I do think that there was a stern statement released by the NCAA yesterday that we take these matters very seriously, and you can't blame CBS on one hand for they put a ton of money into this and they're trying to do that, but I would think they'd be smart next year to okay, if you want to see the bracket, go to our website. You can download it there, or if you want the reveal, just keep watching. I would think this is a good lesson in modern media where they probably have to diversify how they disseminate the information.
Sports Illustrated, Pete Thamel here on the Rich Eisen Show. So did Syracuse get dispensation from the NCAA selection committee because their coach wasn't there because of violations? Did that actually happen, Pete?
So, I mean, I wasn't in the room for the conversations, but it was. I think it was certainly something that was considered. The NCAA finds itself in these weird, dark quandaries, and that is certainly one of them. And it's hard to argue they didn't play better with Boeheim. I mean, they lost to a bad St. John's team and got thumped at a very mediocre Georgetown team. Lost to Clemson at home, I believe. During that time, so I would think that there had to have been some consideration of that. But when you look at it's funny, my alma mater and your alma mater were teetering on the bubble yesterday, and the most disappointing thing for me about the selection, and we've seen this now the last couple of years. I wrote this all the way back 4 or 5 years ago at the New York Times. I remember sitting there watching these things pop up, and the little guy doesn't get a shake, man. I mean, you look at the Bonaventures, the Monmouths. I mean, this tournament would be better, in my opinion, if the Monmouth and St. Bonaventure were in as opposed to Michigan Syracuse. Just the spirit of the NCAA tournament is not mediocre big conference teams. Now, everything's so flat this year. Could one of those teams win a couple games? Of course. But I really think the more bubbles we see fall like this with the Valparaisos of the world, not getting a shot. I just think the tournament goes further away from the roots of what makes it great. That was my disappointing takeaway, but it was not surprising. That is now a trend, and I don't think it's going away.
Well, is that a money thing? Is that a TV thing? Since we're on the whole concept of the NCAA and networks having proprietary content, do you think that's what it is?
I don't want to go all like conspiracy theory, but if you look at the trends of what has been picked, and look, those guys do a good job, and they really hunker down, and they've done a good job demystifying that process over the years to a large extent. But when you look at a portrait of the bubble year in and year out, the trends are undeniable that it's towards that. And I mean, what's the motivating factor in everything, in college sports? It's money. So CBS is happier today that they're going to have Syracuse and Michigan. Those are two huge ratings drivers.
So I got Pete Thamel of Sports Illustrated here on the Rich Eisen Show. I'm sure you heard Calipari. I mean, we played the soundbite in our first hour as well when he was on with Reese Davis on the Worldwide Leader last night, thanking the committee for lighting a fire under his team for a 4 seed, but also lamenting that it's a shifting target every year as to what the selection committee apparently considers the most important metric to taking someone off the bubble or seeding them. Do you have any insight on that, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, so you look at Tulsa this year. I mean, most people didn't even consider them candidates to get in. I mean, they're the fourth team from a pretty pedestrian American Athletic Conference. I mean, the people who really follow that stuff close, make their bracket their job, are beyond mystified of Tulsa. They think it's one of the worst inclusions in the NCAA tournament bracket, in the last generation. And I think Cal to some extent is right. Now, Cal is always looking for a boogeyman. No,
all
Cal
coaches
is only
do. Sure.
happiest when he's tortured. So he always wants something to motivate, to fire up his team. His point that the Sunday title games don't really reflect, the results of them aren't reflected in the bracket, I think is an accurate one. They have not shown a lot of ability to be nimble with those Sunday title games in order to have the results reflected. But I mean, this is a different Kentucky team we're dealing with here. This is not the Kentucky with Anthony Davis or some of those hyper talented like Boogie Cousins teams back in the day. They are talented but flawed, kind of just like everybody else in the field. And I think once you get past like 5 or 6 teams, it really starts to look the same in this field. And Kentucky's kind of just another one of those teams.
Yeah, Jay Billis said he don't look much for a glass slipper this year, that it's going to be a name school that's going to go ahead on a run and take it down or go deep into the tournament. That said, do you have an upset for me? Do you give me an upset here?
I've got some upsets for you.
What do you got, Pete?
Upsets for you. I took Stephen F. Austin over West Virginia. That, to me, stylistically, Rich, is the most fascinating game of the first round. Stephen F. Austin forces more turnovers than anyone in the country. West Virginia, obviously, is pressed Virginia, as you know. Stephen F. Austin plays the same way. Mm-hmm. So that you're hoping for like an old fat lever Denver Nuggets like versus the Sonics in like the mid '80s kind of pace game there.
Good one.
That should be. I think that'll be a really fun game. Mm-hmm. I really like VCU over Oregon State. One of the key hallmarks I look at for teams that can be upset are teams that a lot of their success has been at home, and Oregon State definitely falls in that category. Look, they're 19-12 and a 7 seed, which is a little bit mystifying, and they're a young team, and they really struggled, or their stars are young, I should say, and they really struggled out of Corvallis. So I really feel like VCU, they make you uncomfortable anyway with the way that they play, and I feel like that. It's a 10-7 game, but that was one that really jumped out at me in terms of like your double-digit pantheon upsets. One thing to remember is that a majority of the teams that won their conference tournaments were not the 1 seeds. There was some ridiculous number, like 14, only 1 out of the first 15 or something like that. So when you look at your South Dakota States and your Hawaiis and your Buffaloes that are all kind of sitting there, those aren't necessarily the best teams in their league. So they may not have the best value. They were the team that got hot. I did pick Yale over Baylor.
Look at you.
Skimming here.
Look at you.
And I did pick, what a weird story that the whole Yale thing is. That'll be fascinating to see how that plays on the big stage. And I picked Little Rock over Purdue.
Little Rock over. So Stephen, you like Stephen F. Austin, Yale,
yes.
Virginia Commonwealth. We've heard that many times though in previous years, and then you give Stephen, and then you like Yale. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And Little Rock's 29
Little
and
Rock.
4, and that's a pretty good conference. That's a different. I mean, Stephen F. Austin plays in a terrible conference. They've won 20 games in a row, but they really haven't beaten anybody. They're 27 and 5, but Little Rock's 29 and 4 is a little bit better earned, and I do think that'll be a close game against Purdue. And yeah, but I did not go coming into the tournament the way the college basketball season itself unfolded. A bit of a starless season. No like polarizing dominant team like Kentucky was last year, even like Wisconsin last year, old familiar. The thought would be, this tournament's going to be wide open, et cetera, et cetera. But the way the field kind of fell, especially with the winners of the conference tournaments, I actually agree with what Jay said last night. I have Kansas, Oklahoma, Carolina, and Michigan State in my Final Four, which is like really boring, really, really boring. A couple of people I talked to today liked A&M coming out of the West. The West is going to kind of be that fun, open thing. In trending to pick.
Yep.
I'm staying away from the SEC, and I'm staying away from the Pac-12. I just don't think those leagues had great years. I mean, if you told me a month ago that the Pac-12 was going to get 7 bids, I would have been really, really surprised.
So then our poll question today, Pete Thamel at richeisenshow.com. Quickly ask him that, Brockman, before we ask one last question.
Hey, Pete, which 2 seed has the best chance to win the tournament? Nova, Oklahoma, Xavier, Michigan State.
I noticed you mentioned a couple there, so...
Always answer Izzo, right? Isn't that
That's
like
what I said.
What has he taught us? I mean, the guts of the team that made the Final Four last year are back. This is one of Izzo's more talented teams, especially compared to the field. The field is flat this year, and so coaching is going to matter, size is going to matter, and experience is going to matter. If you're looking for like tenets to like generally guide your picks this year, I think age, size, and coaching are the 3 fundamental ones. Obviously, talent's important, but there aren't, other than Carolina, who I picked to win it, which I know is horrifically boring, but I just think they're peaking at the right time, and they're the most talented team. Those I like a team like Miami to make a pretty deep run because they have dudes who are 23 and 24. Sheldon McClellan and Angel Rodriguez.
Normally that's reserved for BYU, Pete. I mean.
Yes, exactly.
Last one for you, Pete, because I've got to run, and I know that I've got a third-hour guest that you've done a piece on in Sean Miller of Arizona. What intrigues you about the coach?
So I was chatting with Sean the other day, and he lost 40 pounds this year. I'd seen him on TV the night before, and I just kind of mentioned, hey, Sean, you look great. And he started talking about he lost 40 pounds since August, and really, not like a quickie fad thing. Like he sat down and said, I need to change my life. His epiphany came when he went to the track this summer at Del Mar, and he couldn't button his pants. His waist size was over 40 inches, and he was up over 240 pounds. And he really locked in the same way he locks in coaching. I think Sean's one of the best coaches in college basketball, and he said, I need to change things, and he's totally transformed himself and his body. He's had to go to the tailor twice this year to get his suits let in, which is a good problem to have. And so it was cool of him, and I hope you ask him about it later, Rich, just to share his story, because guys like Billy Donovan, we worked with at USA Basketball, who's a really fit guy, and Ed Cooley, who has lost like 130 pounds last year. They really inspired him, and I thought it was kind of cool that Sean shared that story kind of to inspire others. To have people say, "Hey, I'm working too much. I need to change my life for my health and for my family and for the long term." So I'm happy for Sean that he's done that, and it was he really gave some pretty good insight how it changed his life.
And that's on
that
SI.
Story will go up later on SI.com.
There you go.
To give a blatant promotion.
No, that's what we're all about. Blatant promotion was, by the way, the original working title of the Rich Eisen Show. Until they said, "Hey, you got to put your name on it." Pete, thanks so much. Thanks for calling in. We'll chat down the line.
Appreciate it, man.
You bet. That's Pete Thamel at SI. Pete Thamel.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.